Welcome back to Real Family Secrets. Grab your snacks, get comfortable. The people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My name is Ethan Cole, and for 3 weeks I was convinced my wife was planning to leave me. I found a secret bank account, hidden statements, cash withdrawals I couldn't explain. What I didn't know was that she was quietly saving my company from a man I trusted more than almost anyone in my life. Priya and I had been married 9 years when I found the statement. I run a mid-sized logistics company in Denver, 40 employees, a decade of work, everything I owned tied up in it. My business partner, a man named Curtis Boyd, had been with me since the beginning. College roommates, then co-founders, then something closer to brothers than friends. It started small. I was looking for a tax document in our joint filing cabinet and found a bank statement from an account I didn't recognize. Priya's name only, opened 8 months earlier, with almost $60,000 moved into it in irregular chunks. My mind went exactly where you'd expect it to go. An affair, a divorce fund, a woman quietly preparing an exit while I had no idea anything was wrong. I didn't confront her right away. I told myself I needed to understand what I was looking at before I said anything I couldn't take back. So I watched. I checked mail before she did. I noticed she'd started taking calls in the garage, door closed, voice low. 3 weeks of this nearly destroyed something in me that had nothing to do with the actual truth. I barely slept. I started running financial scenarios in my head, what a divorce would cost me, whether I'd have to sell my share of the company, how I'd explain any of it to our 2 kids. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I got a call from our company's accountant, a careful, methodical woman named Denise Farrow. "Ethan," she said, "I need you to come into the office. There's something in the books I can't explain, and I don't think it's good." What Denise showed me took the floor out from under me in a completely different direction than I'd expected. Curtis had been slowly siphoning money out of the company for over a year. Small transfers, disguised as vendor payments, routed through a shell account he controlled. Just over $340,000, all told, moved out gradually enough that our normal reporting hadn't flagged it. My business partner, my college roommate, a man who'd stood at my wedding and given a toast that made half the room cry. "How long have you known?" I asked Denise. "I found the first irregularity 6 weeks ago," she said. "I brought it to your wife." "You brought it to Priya. Why not to me?" "Because Priya asked me to," Denise said carefully. "She came to me first, 8 months ago, with a suspicion. She'd overheard something at a company dinner, Curtis talking to his wife about moving money before Ethan notices. She didn't want to alarm you without proof, so she asked me to help her build a case quietly, on the side, so you wouldn't have to know until we had something solid enough to act on." The secret account, the private phone calls, the cash movements I'd built an entire imaginary affair around in my head. Priya had been pulling money into a separate account, specifically so Curtis wouldn't notice unusual activity in accounts tied to me directly, using it to pay a forensic accountant and, eventually, a lawyer to build an airtight case against my own business partner. I drove home that afternoon feeling like the smallest version of myself I'd been in years. 3 weeks of suspicion, of cold silences at dinner, of watching my own wife like she was a stranger, and the entire time she'd been quietly protecting everything I'd built. Priya was in the kitchen when I got home. I stood in the doorway for a long moment before I said anything. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to know how sorry I am before I even finish saying it." She turned around, dish towel still in her hand. "What's wrong?" I told her everything, the statement I'd found, the affair I'd convinced myself was happening, the 3 weeks of watching her like a suspect in her own home. I watched her face shift from confusion to disbelief to something that looked, for one terrible second, like real hurt. "You thought I was leaving you," she said slowly. "For 3 weeks you thought I was cheating, and you never once just asked me. I know how that sounds. I should have just asked." "Ethan, I have spent 8 months protecting your company from a man who's supposed to be your best friend. I hired a forensic accountant with money I moved carefully so Curtis wouldn't notice. I've been terrified every single day that I'd get something wrong and he'd realize we were onto him before we had enough proof. And this whole time you thought I was the problem." "I'm not going to make excuses," I said. "I was scared, and scared people build stories that make sense of the fear, even when the stories are wrong. You did something incredibly brave, and I repaid it by being suspicious of you instead of trusting you." Priya was silent for a long moment, and then something in her posture softened just slightly. "I should have told you sooner," she admitted. "I thought I was protecting you from the stress until we had something solid. I didn't realize the silence itself would become its own kind of damage." We called Denise back that night, and by the following week we had a lawyer, a forensic report, and enough documentation to remove Curtis from the company entirely. The confrontation with Curtis happened in a conference room with our lawyer present. He tried, briefly, to deny it, then to minimize it. Then finally, when the numbers were laid out too precisely to argue with, he just went quiet. "I'll pay it back," he said finally. "You'll pay back every dollar through the settlement our lawyer drew up," I told him. "And you'll sign the buyout agreement removing you from the company by Friday." 4. Curtis signed. The company recovered the full $340,000 over an 18-month settlement, and I bought out his remaining shares for a fraction of what they'd been worth, given the circumstances. Priya and I went to counseling for a few months afterward, not because our marriage was broken, but because I needed to understand why my mind had gone so quickly to betrayal instead of trust, and she needed to process 8 months of carrying something enormous entirely alone. The company's stronger now than it's ever been. I run it with a new partner. Actually, a co-owner structure now includes Priya formally, something I should have done years ago, given how much she's actually saved it. I think about those 3 weeks sometimes, the version of my marriage I built entirely out of fear and a bank statement I didn't understand. I got lucky. The truth turned out to be better than anything I'd imagined, but it could just as easily have gone the other way if I hadn't finally just asked. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real family stories and tell us in the comments, would you have asked sooner or waited too, like I did?
Finger on trigger when I walk through the mud. Hood force my soul out of concrete and blood. Stats in the attic where the badges can't flood. Speak of the line, get your name in the crowd. Trigger when I walk through the mud. Hood froze my soul out of concrete and blood. Stacks in the attic where the badges can't flood. Speak out of line, get your name in the crowd. Ride through the lanes with the burner on stud. Snakes got exposed when the deal turned to dust. Cash pile filthy but the circle got judged. Brothers went fed for a bag they misjudged. Tear rough like a nail through the throat. They smiled at the table while they sank my boat. Trust got destroyed when they flipped on the vote. Now I roll on with the grudge that I took. Finger on trigger when I walk through the mud. Hood froze my soul out of concrete and blood. Stacks in the attic where the badges can't flood. Speak out of line, get your name in the crowd. Ride through the lanes with the burner on stud. Snakes got exposed when the deal turned to dirt. Cash pile 50 but the circle got judged. Brothers went fed for a bag and misjudged. When the tension get thick, they plotted the move while they played me slick. One word drop and the payback come quick. I don't do warnings, I just handle the lick. Finger on trigger when I walk through the mud. Hood forced my soul out of concrete and blood. Stacks in the attic where the badges can't flood. Speak out of line, get your name in the crowd. Right through the lanes with the burner on stud. Snakes got exposed when the deal turned to dust. Cash pile filthy but the circle got judged. Brothers went fed for a bag they misjudged.